All right, thanks. Let's center ourselves if we could here. Center ourselves if we could in prayer, and we'll go ahead and begin. Let's pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for this day that you have made, for Barbara, for her many, many gifts, and for willingness to share with us today, and the gifts of heart, mind, and soul that combine to make this adult education hour a meaningful one week after week. Bless us here as the rain reminds us that we're connected both inside this space, but also around the world on the live stream and in all of your creation. In Christ we pray. Amen. All right, come on in. We've got some chairs over here at this side as well. Well, welcome to Adult Education here, where we gather at 9:15 each Sunday during the program year. And as part of our 70th anniversary celebration weekend, as many of you know, we are thrilled that today Barbara Brown Taylor is with us in adult education and in leading our 10:30 service in preaching following this today. Many of you are familiar with Barbara's books. They've been very, very meaningful to me over the years. The way in which the broader church today is changing, and Barbara is just an astute observer of that, but also even more deeply on the personal journey that each of us has spiritually from whatever tradition we come from, but in particular from the Christian tradition, to grow more deeply in our appreciation of what it means to be human, to be connected, to be part of a global world, and as Christians to follow Christ. And so her writings, which everyone from the New York Times to Time Magazine to Baylor University and Piedmont and others have noted is some of the greatest and most influential literally of our time. And so as our Susan R. Andrews Lecturer for the Year, lecture series named for my predecessor, Susan Andrews, here and her ministry from 89 to 2006, makes possible for us to welcome Barbara today. And so I ask that you join me in welcoming to Bradley Hills, Barbara Brown Taylor.
Is that the camera for people who aren't not?
You know this.
Right. I'm going to tell you about something like that. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy I went to the celebration dinner last night. I told Pastor David, it just made me miss a church like this. I live in a little tiny county with one Episcopal church, and in our tradition, you can't go back once you've left. So I'm kind of, wandering around on Sundays, but I felt so at home last night, and it's just a great pleasure to be here. I think the plan, you know it better than I do, is I talk for a few minutes. I've got about 20 minutes worth here, and that should give us about that amount of time for me to talk back to you about anything this comes up. Last night, someone asked what I was going to talk about, and I said, I thought I'd just tell you what you already know. So we'll really talk about a book I wrote called Holy Envy, Finding God in the Faith of Others. And I'll tell you some stories from that. Does that sound okay? Hi. So I've been waiting a whole long time to be here. It's kind of my dream come true. I looked at Gmail, which has a way better memory than I do. And I think Pastor David and I started corresponding in 2018. No, it was right before the book came out, and then COVID hit. And so when I try to search for a message from you, I've got a really long list to look through. So it's a way this place has stayed with me since then. I do want to talk about some of the content of Holy Envy and also about that title, which is troublesome to some people, but my dream was to come to one address where people from three Abrahamic traditions came to pray, parallel and then sometimes together, but I don't know another congregation like this. So you took me out of retirement to deal with the airports and come here because 6601 Bradley Boulevard was bingo for me. This is the room, I take it, where the Jewish Federation meets, and also I worked so hard on Makami, which I heard David say last night, close enough, the Islamic Center. So shalom to anybody else who might be listening, as well as peace be with you to my Bradley Hills hosts. I'm calling the talk Holy Envy at Bradley Hills Presbyterian Church. But for those who've never heard that phrase before, I'll start by telling you about Melba's Po' Boy Shop in New Orleans, which is run by a Harvard graduate named Jane Wolfe, who runs a literacy center out of Melba's and gives away 100 free books at lunchtime every now and then to anybody who comes in. So she asked me to come. And I mean, there were all kinds of people. I was just huddled at this little table while people came in for their chicken tender on a bun to go. There's even a French fry sandwich you put between bread. And then, of course, fish and shrimp po' boys. Jane was making everybody scooch closer to me if they wanted me to sign their book, but there was one man in particular on her staff who seemed really reluctant to do that. He finally stepped up and he said, "I will let you sign this book because it is free." He said, "But my mother must never see it." Because for a devout Muslim, there is nothing holy about envy, and there never will be. It's a vile sin, and nothing you can say will ever change that. I said, "I didn't know that." And I asked him to tell me more about it, and we ended up making that kind of connection, you know, that lasts for me. All these years later, I'll never forget that man. When I went home, I followed up on what he had said, and I found out more about why hasad is considered a disease of the heart in Islam, because it involves doubting God's wisdom and justice in bestowing blessings on people. And it involves you wishing theirs would be taken away so that you can have them for yourself. Not what I had in mind. But it's clearly what he had in his, an important teaching in his tradition. And he had such a double portion of straightforward goodwill that he got us right over that hump. So that maybe he remembers me too. I have no idea. But I tell you the story because it's about an encounter between two people first, and only then about a difference in their beliefs second. An order that doesn't always prevail in human relationships with people whom we determine for one reason or another are not like us. I think too often we begin with our beliefs first to decide whether or not we will encounter other people or not. The demographics of our divisions change. I think they're changing right now, along with the ideologies that support them. But I've never been any good at the big picture. Questions like, what do you think the global solution is? Or, you know, or how do we go about the healing of the nation? Or what is the future of the church? This is what I do too. I've never been any good at that. The only part I'm any good at is the where two or three are gathered together part. You know, the love your neighbor part, still working on the love your enemy and those who persecute you, but it's all in the book. So that's the scale of everything I'm going to say today. It's small scale, it's person to person. And I harbor a hope, if not a faith, that that's where the big stuff gets its footage. So the scale of everything that follows is what happens in the human heart when the stranger danger alarm goes off, and we all have decisions to make about what happens next. I took the title Holy Envy from a Swedish theologian and New Testament scholar named Krister Stendahl, who became the Lutheran Bishop of Stockholm in 1984. I have Lutheran friends who say Lutheran is redundant in that sentence, since Sweden, Church of Sweden, has been Lutheran since the Reformation, which helps actually because he came to the forefront in 1985, a year after he got there, when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced the construction of a magnificent new temple, the Stockholm, Sweden temple, in a leafy suburb right outside of Stockholm. Local religious anxiety boiled over, and Bishop Stendahl was called to the microphone in order to address the press. If his listeners expected him to exercise his office by defending the traditional faith of Sweden, they were surprised because what he did instead was offer 3 rules for religious understanding, for engaging religious strangers, whether they were fresh from the other side of the world or they'd been living for generations on the other side of town. First, he said, when you're trying to understand another religion, you should ask its adherents and not its critics. Second, don't compare your best to their worst. And third, leave room for holy envy. But he didn't say what he meant by that. He just left it hanging, but I loved it so much when I first heard it. Perfect oxymoron, like divine decadence. Or good grief. How could one of the deadly sins be holy? And what might make it so? And what made him think it was vital for religious understanding? That's what led me to write the book. The phrase became central in teaching world religions at Piedmont, what was then college, now university, which is a tiny, small liberal arts college in rural Northeast Georgia, where I still live. In an equally small county, I think 42,000 people in the whole county, last time we counted, with, this is true, one bowling alley, one movie theater, 3 rivers, and 62 churches. And there are 3 new ones being built on my way to the expressway to the Atlanta airport. So not Bethesda, in other words. It's important for you to know where I'm talking from. Most of my students came from Georgia and had been raised in church-going families, though plenty of them were using their distance from home to get a little distance on their home religion as well. And I think that explains why Religion 101, Religions of the World, it was always full for 20 years, every semester, often with a waiting list, because students had questions about religion they didn't feel safe asking at home or at church, or they weren't satisfied with the answers they got there, both about their own faith and about the faith of others. So once word got out somehow that you could not pass my class without worshiping false idols, but also that there were free meals after the field trips, students didn't even ask to see the syllabus before signing up. They were in. What I knew, and they didn't, was that they were in for more than a scenic tour of the world's great religions. Though that's what the textbook offered them, you know, colorful maps and concise timelines and photos worthy of National Geographic and essential vocabulary words at the end of every chapter. For the 5 religions, we had to finally whittle it down to 5, and then I had 3 days each for the world's great religions, 45 minutes times 3. But there was nothing to smell in that book. There was nothing you could eat in that book. There was no music in it. There was no silence. There was no body heat. And that's why field trips became such an important part of the course, because they gave students a chance to get off the school bus and meet people who complicated things for them. Kind and funny and generous people who didn't match their stereotypes of Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, or even other Christians. One woman was forbidden for going on the field trip to the Episcopal Cathedral of Atlanta because her husband said it wasn't Christian. They met people who said surprising things, inspiring things, who left their cell phones on, who made tea for us. The Sikhs made lunch for us, who said things like, "What a great question," or "Come back anytime." Once that happened for the students, there was just no going back. They would never again believe everything they thought or even had been told about people of other faiths. When they got back on the bus, their certainty had great big cracks in it, which is, after all, I think, what the best education does. It shakes the ground hard enough for the brittle things, the flabby things, to fall down so that there's new space for more resilient things to grow. It could have happened in the classroom. I could have invited practitioners of different faiths to come visit us instead of going to see them. It would have been a lot cheaper. It would have been a lot easier. I wouldn't have had to crawl down the aisle of the dark bus after all the students had gotten off to pick up their forgotten water bottles and candy wrappers. I wouldn't have had to take home a dozen styrofoam containers of Indian food they left because it wasn't fried chicken. But if I had invited visitors to the class instead, the guests would have taken all the risks. You know, they would have had to find the college, get a parking spot, locate the classroom, enter into 25 pairs of staring eyes, endure my introduction, and then say something to put everyone at ease before they had, say, 60 minutes to present one of the world's great religions, all the beauties of it, all of the meaning in it, as the sole representative of their faith. It just didn't seem like the best way. So the students and I started taking the risks instead, leaving our comfort zone in order to enter other people's, entering their sacred spaces without knowing the rules, listening carefully while they told us where to take off our shoes and where to store them. At one Buddhist monastery, wait, have a seat, but no, not with your back to the altar, please. Face me if you will, and I promise to tell you everything that is on that altar. Yes, that is real gold on the Buddha. Yes, the ceiling is very beautiful. Yes, you may sit on one of those cushions if you like, but first, like what you just did, David, let's close our eyes and settle, because you came a long way. And it's important to leave the traffic behind. To offer hospitality is one thing, and you offer it congregationally, by the way, which is different than what I'm talking about. But hospitality often puts the host in charge. To receive hospitality is something else altogether, especially when you and your religion are used to being the main one. When all the school holidays are your religious holidays. When you have no trouble finding greeting cards that speak your religious language at Walmart or CVS. When you know what the little silver fish icon on the bumper of the car ahead of you means. When you're used to things like that, being a guest in a different kind of space where a different kind of language is spoken can transform you like being a host just never could. It levels the playing field. It puts you in receiving mode, which at least for me has a lot less ego in it than the giving mode. Someone pointed out to me, the hand that gives is always higher than the hand that receives. Ouch. It also accelerates the learning curve as you find yourself in the minority for once, seeing the world through other people's lenses instead of expecting them to adjust to yours. One of the biggest surprises for students who got on the bus, remember rural Georgia, was that no one tried to convert them at the other end. Since the Christians expected others to do unto them as they had done to others, they were prepared to resist the evangelization that they knew was coming. As often as I assured them that visiting a Buddhist monastery would not make them Buddhist, any more than visiting France would make them French. They made sure I knew what they would and would not do when they got there. They would not bow when the teacher came in the room. They would keep their eyes open while everyone else closed theirs. They would trust Jesus to know they were there for extra credit. Yeah. All these years later, I retired in 2017. I have kept this stack of Browning papers, one-page reports that the students wrote after they got back, also for extra credit, including one from a young man who'd been really concerned about the Tibetan Buddhist monastery, which is why I stressed it. He wrote this: "There may have been some rituals and ceremonies that I was not sure I wanted to take part in," he wrote. "But when we arrived, it was different." To his surprise, he said he was able to clear his mind during the meditation periods, reaching a place of calm that was entirely new for him. He said, "The whole experience made me think about changing my perspective on what is going on in my life. Not about changing my religion, but the way I look at things. This may be what we've been learning in class about different worldviews, but I didn't understand the concept until I saw it firsthand at the monastery." As you can imagine, it was often difficult for Christian students to see and admit they saw something lovely in another faith tradition. The divine singular was so much a part of their religion: one God, one Son, one way, one truth, one life, that to see beauty in another way felt like treason to them. When they experienced a new calm at a Buddhist monastery, or sensed the deep reverence in a room full of Muslims who bent all the way to the ground in prayer, like one wave breaking, it felt to some of them like telling Jesus they were seeing other people. When they loved the drumming at the Krishna temple, or the sweet peace of the Friday night Shabbat service at the synagogue, it made them worry they were losing their faith. One of the things that always slapped my heart so hard was when they would tell me they had called home to tell their families about all that they were learning in class, only to receive a warning about falling for all that stuff. Or being careful they didn't open their minds so far their brains fell out. And I think that's why the students loved the concept of holy envy when I taught it, as briefly as I taught it to you. Not because they cared who Krister Stendahl was or why he put those two words together in the first place, but because they had already experienced the envy. And they were so grateful to hear there might be something holy about it. That it might make them better people instead of worse people. They didn't want to steal anyone's blessings. They just wanted to bask in some of the blessings of other traditions. And what that did was cause many of them to wonder if they might have overlooked some of the blessings in their own tradition by taking them completely for granted. Even students who identified as atheist or agnostic or humanist or undecided warmed to the idea of holy envy, left room for them too. And they adapted it to meet them where they were. One wrote this: I have been ignited by holy envy in a whole lot of ways. For instance, I love the Hindu notion that karma is not measured or judged by a higher power. I'm responsible for my own actions. Whether I decide to believe in a religion or not, I'll keep this moral code of self-accountability with me. Another one wrote this: when it comes to holy envy, one thing really sticks out in my mind. When we went to the mosque on our field trip, the imam spoke to us ahead of time, and what he told us is my holy envy. He told us how he doesn't wish to convert us to Islam. He just wants us to be the best people we could be, regardless of religion. This was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard, and it's my holy envy because I wish Christianity was this way. That's his, there are Christianities. I don't need to tell you, they're plural, not singular. Grading these final exams was such a dismal exercise, right?
Yeah.
How do you come up with an objective measure for what it takes for a person to work up enough courage to lay down their habitual defenses, to handle some existential anxiety, to feel their hearts get bigger all of a sudden, or to have formerly religious strangers speak directly to those hearts? There are so many problems with that. There were then, there are now. Right after the book came out in 2019, all I had to do was Google religion in the news, and I read 11 killed in synagogue massacre, suspect charged with 29 counts. Or terror attacks at New Zealand mosques leave 50 people dead. Or at least 200 dead in Easter Day attacks in Sri Lankan churches. Oh, God. These days, I think the hatred's being shoveled into politics instead. But I think Stendahl's 3 rules, I think they still hold. When you're trying to understand another worldview, ask its adherents and not its enemies. Don't compare your best to their worst. Leave room for holy envy. See how much this gets harder? Or if that's too much to ask, leave room to imagine that what we have most in common is not our religion or our politics, but our humanity, embodied in such astonishingly diverse ways that it seems possible this might be the Creator's will instead of a deviation from it. To put all of us in reach of people whose main gift is not our sameness, but our difference, our ability to shake each other up so that the cracks in our separate certainties spring leaks. And when we reach out to steady ourselves, we find other human hands as warm and vulnerable as our own, reaching out to us as well. So you'll be the judge of that. And whatever you decide, thank you both online and in this room for giving me your ears for this long. If you have a burning question to ask, by all means ask it. But if you have a short story to tell about being blessed in the last way you expected it by someone very different from you, that would be its own Bradley Hills blessing as well. Thank you.
Can't thank you enough for joining us, but I also wanted to acknowledge that Susan Andrews is with us and has been, and she
Susan, I'm saying hello to you at the worship service, so it's coming out.
may have a comment to make at the very beginning. If you'd like to unmute and say hello, Susan, we welcome you.
Hello, can you hear me? Am I too loud?
I
Thank
saw your picture a lot last night at the dinner.
Barbara, I just need to say that Krista Stendhal was my New Testament professor, the most fabulous professor I've ever had in my life. So thank you for including him. Wonderful.
What a man. I know I wasn't gonna drop names, Harvard and Yale, but yes, I knew him that way, just from a distance, but I can't imagine what it was like to be a student.
Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great to hear you.
So I'll follow this up with just to thank you so much. And I guess what you're saying is that this is a one-to-one world that we're, the difference in following our faith and is one-to-one. I have grandchildren who are Jewish and took them to the church I grew up in, and they were so offended by a number of different parts of that worship that I can't get them back to even visit a Christian church. And then I have so many friends in my own community. If you say church or anything connected to church, the cringe begins, and
Yeah.
it is so difficult to try to, do anything except live my life and continue to support who we are and how we are. But anything that you could add to that,
Who identifies with what she just said? And she got any company in here? You have numbers? Yeah, I've got about 9 responses, so we'll have time for one question. First is, I don't think one-on-one is what it's all about because it's happening in such large numbers. I just read another kind of piece last night that said, it's like, does religion encourage abuse or hatred, or does hatred abuse religion? And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because what better than to try to get the divine to bless whatever it is you're defending against. So I do think it's also corporate at huge political, economic, world history scales, but I don't know how to do anything about that. What I do know something about how to behave, and even that's a stretch sometimes, is what can I do where I live and where I travel? Without being condescending or doing cultural appropriation or all the other things that you can also get into trouble with on the other side. But so the one-on-one is just my limit. It's just what I know how to do. Second thing is my friend John Philip Newell, who's a Scottish, wonderful theologian, and this is being recorded. So if you hear it, Philip, I hope I got this right. But a few years back, he sat through a Christian worship service with a Jewish friend, and he resigned his orders. After that, he's no longer a minister in the church because he just heard so many things he had not heard before. It wasn't like he was renouncing the faith. He may have been renouncing the liturgy, the set prayers, the accustomed way of saying things. And then third thing, and I shouldn't say this one yet, but I just wrote a foreword for Jimmy Carter's book of Sunday school lessons, which are coming out, and they cover 40 years of Sunday school lessons. And in 1970, he used Pharisees in a way that I would never use it today. And by like 1984, he completely swapped. Somehow he started asking questions, and he changed the way he spoke about the way the New Testament tells the story. So that's fraught with danger if you live where I do and people read scripture as telling you the literal truth about what happened. And anybody who disagrees is cuckoo, but I suffer from what you suffer from because of the books I write. And if anybody finds out, they say, what's the topic of your books? Economics. Anything I can say, because the minute you say religion, they just go right back to what they were doing. So I don't know what to do about that except embody You know, they say St. Francis, one of his best sermons was when he just didn't say a word, but he looked at people with love. And so that's the only thing I can figure is incarnation goes for me too. That somehow I'm meant to walk the talk and not talk the talk sometimes, but you know, hiding my identity, I can't. I can't. I've got my dove underneath my dress today, but. So I see a hand here, I see 3 hands, and I'm gonna, yes.
So you wanted some stories from this community. For me, the embodiment has been working with the interfaith refugee group in the last 9 years. And it has with BJC, now Temple Micah is involved, various Muslim communities, the Yadara, Washia, and this group has been the embodiment of doing things together. And that's where the conversations also happened. And, you know, we all worry about our families and education and then we're also able to discuss religion and celebrate each other's important holidays. You know, the iftars or we did it fast a whole lot, so I don't think we quite understood the importance of the iftar when we break the fast. But there are many of us in this community, it's nothing like, you know, carrying furniture that will work on the same plane.
See, you just added a good number 4, do something together before you talk about religion. Wouldn't that help? The interfaith groups that are all about, let's sit down and talk about our understanding of God and say, can we pick up trash for a while instead? And go do something first. So thank you. Yes, Jessica, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As I was sharing with you last night, you know, when I completed my degree in theology, was at Catholic University, but I was very certain that I was called into ministry and very certain that I would never find a church where I could express this belief that God was for everybody and that we didn't have the corner on God. And now 20 years later, I don't know that community and it's a beautiful thing. And I've been thinking a lot about how we show up right now and how we as Christians change the rhetoric and change the thought because and not letting Christian nationalism speak for all of us. And I remember a time when I walked away from the church as a young person and said, I just don't want anything to do with that. I don't want my name tied to it. And now I feel very differently about how I show up. And I want my name tied to it because I want to represent that. And so I've been thinking a lot about how we shift the narrative, how congregations like Bradley Hills, how voices like yours, how do we shift the narrative right now? How do we reclaim the spotlight? How do we reclaim Jesus as who Jesus truly is? And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I don't have anything to add to that. No, thank you. Thank you. No, what I'll take away from that is instead of not branding myself, go ahead and say, but give me a minute, give me a second. Because unfortunately, there's a very loud version of Christianity right now that is impossible to drown out, and I don't really want to drown it out. You know, so I even take some comfort looking at earlier centuries in the church. There've been a lot. There've been movements that were in the wilderness a long time because they broke away from the dominant strain. You know, there are ways in which the history gives me patience in my lifetime. So I like your piece. Like wear a T-shirt said, "This is what a Christian acts like," or something. Be very, very careful.
You could ask also, if you have a question, repeat it twice. Apparently the folks who are remote are having problems hearing the question.
Oh, I could repeat it too.
Yeah.
Although not a story I can't. Yes.
Barbara, so I just want to marry those two comments a moment ago, because to me, it has a lot to do with the commitment and curiosity that redefines Christianity in a way. there are a number of articles in the Times and elsewhere just about sort of Christian nationalism declining, and sort of evangelical Christianity. There's others in this room who can speak eloquently to that too, but challenges in that space are just sort of imploding over time. And so by the way variety of factors, it's sort of that's their own issue. But part of ours is what both Brigida and Rosanna lifted up. And that's embodied by this space, as many people here know. Behind Barbara is, behind that wall, for folks who are newer, there's a Torah. And behind those covered spots to the left are dozens of Muslim prayer nights, right? And so every Friday afternoon here at 1:30, this room is transformed into a Juma prayer for our mosque here. And this room is full of Muslims praying every Friday afternoon, and then Friday evening at 7:30. This is a Jewish congregation will worship here on Saturday morning every week, and then Sunday morning at 8:30, we typically will have our Christian service here. And my point of raising that is just the presence of being, sometimes I'll just walk down the hall and just come to the Muslim prayer service at 1:30 on a Friday, or come to the Jewish service at night, and even in after the attacks in Israel in October of last year, the sermons from the imam, the sermons from the rabbi were surprisingly similar, or similar to what I was writing. And so part of the curiosity of being open to other faith traditions reminds me that I think the best part of our own is also embodied in, I think, the best part of other faith traditions, not just in the Abrahamic faith, but certainly in that. And then Brigida's point about, commitment, not watered down faith, but commitment to Christ involves doing with others, whether it's for a refugee program or whatever it is. And so our commitment and curiosity seems part and parcel to sort of responding to that other narrative in the world. As you travel around, I'm sure in other faith communities, it's one of the blessings of your calling. And so anything we can learn, anything you've seen that pollinates our ministry in the future that you might say, have you ever tried X? In this one church in Puerto Rico, they're doing X. Or Tacoma, you might consider Y. We're open to thinking about how we go deeper in our curiosity and our commitment.
Thank you. And I'm here because I'm the learner here. So thank you. Yes.
I just thought about Linda said, do something. So I'm going to say, do something. I just know that I'm in Taiwan. The other day I went to see my there was a single market. And I didn't want he's an Italian doctor from Taiwan. He's also a Buddhist. He said, oh, what are you doing here? I said, oh, we got 17 years in university and I'm doing a lot of things and why not to people so much? I said, would you like to know us? I don't want people to go to heaven. Why should I go to the church?
Yeah.
Okay. So I said, well, you have 2 minutes. I will just let you know that I'm not going to the heaven or something. I'm coming here to learn how to appreciate it, to learn more about the teaching and all of that. To learn appreciation because I feel like I'm very lucky. And how do I do good things to start from there? I said, you are Buddhist, you know about reincarnation. So you want to be after you die, you want to be. I said, I want to be like a moon after I die. So you want to be you and your way lucky. This is very responsible. Okay, I'm going to let my wife to go to your church.
Yeah, don't just do something, say something. Do you have 2 minutes? Did you have 2 minutes? You did it in 2 minutes. Yes.
I just want to say that last Sunday I was in my car driving instead of the church and I was listening to the live stream on my radio. And I thought David had said something that just spoke so much to me. He said, the older I get, the less I know and the more I believe. So I just wanted, it spoke to me very much and it ties into what you're talking about. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
Again, and why would I comment? It's just lovely. And the part I will tag, hair color, is things do change, don't they? Perspectives change. And I used to think I had to be mad at one thing to go to the next thing, and I don't. I can love that, love this. and then love that, but age really does shift my perspective. I become, yeah, was it maybe Augustine? I mean, one of the big, great guys said, you know, no, it was Aquinas who said, I look back on everything I've written and it's like straw to me now. I don't know what he meant, but it's just because he, you know, I have to think it had something to do with the gentling of age. So thank you. Who has had your hand up and I keep ignoring you? I think it's you.
I just wanted to share, briefly, from two experiences. One, as part of Bradley Hills, I had a wonderful opportunity to speak at a Muslim congregation with one of our partner congregations, and that was so special, and a sense of welcome and the honor I felt to have that opportunity to share. I think I talked about Father Oscar Romero's witness for justice and human rights, because that was sort of the theme of their day. And the special conversations I had with folks afterwards, and that sort of for me represents our interfaith witness at Bradley Hills and how much that means. And then the other nod to Holy Envy is through a special relationship with this young man, my husband. We met in divinity school, and it's a mostly Christian divinity school. So actually, Simon was classically Christian in a certain way. When I saw him at chapel all the time and taking communion as such, but he spent 16 years as a Hindu monk before divinity school. And at first I didn't quite know what that would mean, but I thought it was really cute, so. You guys have known each other, it was just wonderful to understand through a different vantage point of this deep devotion. And so now my holy envy is waking up in the wee hours and smelling some incense and seeing someone come in with a great glow of having been in prayer for a few hours.
Wow.
And the Indian food at our house was
Really good. Yeah, you tagged a memory for me. I took students to the Vedanta Center of Atlanta just because that was a kind of US friendly. But I remember, you know, Swami Yogashananda knew my scriptures cold. I didn't know his. I mean, I'm so surprised when we went to other places, how many people, well, of course, duh, you know, we're fully familiar way beyond holidays. I mean, way down into it goes back to what David said about listening in at synagogue and at Juma prayers and hearing similar sorts of things being said. But at any rate, my friend Dana Trent married, she met her former Hindu monk husband on a dating app, so. Yeah. And he would say there's no harm about it, you know, that he's carried his monastic life into a happy married life. So you're the second couple I know. Thank you, thank you. Do you have anything, would you like to represent yourself?
Well, just say that, I think that I feel blessed that we learned very early on how to connect in the essence of our faith. And our faith is incredibly important to both of us. It takes different forms, but at its core, there's a recognition of that our in our heart of hearts we're looking to surrender to God and connect to God in a deepest way, and that's the focal point for us.
David, you should say that's time.
Yeah.
How much longer do we have?
About 10 minutes, I'd say 10 minutes and stop, and there may be some in the chat, I don't know if online, Carol.
Remote would like to raise their hand or just ask a question or make a comment, we welcome you.
Yeah, we'll finish at 10.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, you had your hand up. Yes.
Yes, hi, sorry, it's just kind of, I don't wanna describe the speed, but I was born in Indonesia, I grew up in Indonesia, and I remember churches, you know, hosting Ramadan iftar dinners and how it was such, and I have friends and families who are Christians, Buddhists, atheists, Muslims, so all sorts. In fact, when I moved to the United States, it was surprising how much tribalism, even within Christianity, that I'm still learning about, right? It's different denominations, different schisms and all that. So I just want to make that one comment. And then I went to Duke. We've met before. We sat,
Lunch.
we had lunch. Yes, I sat next to him. Yes, that wasn't to Duke. Great school, by the way.
I do remember.
I remember asking, we talked a lot, because we sat next to each other, and I asked a lot about very granular things about Christianity and your faith and such, you know, I remember asking about, oh, should anyone be able to sort of offer up communion, or how do you prepare, like, how do you prepare sermons, you know, because I always find that to be really the best part, you know, if I know you're preaching somewhere, I try to come. Now I'm here. And actually, I'm a member here, so, but I guess I regretted not asking you, in light of all your experience and your, you know, you becoming, you know, you a professor and traveling everywhere, how do you define Christianity? What does it mean for you now to follow Jesus?
Oh, give me that. I think I've given up on that. You can't ask him to repeat his question, like, who is Jesus for you? How do I mean, mostly I don't give answers to questions I have not been asked. You just asked one, and it's a really hard one, but day by day by day, I'm not gonna walk around and say, could we talk about Jesus for a while? I've been trained that's what I should do, but it's not what I do so much. So I went on sabbatical for 3 months, and the whole purpose of the sabbatical was to figure out who Jesus was. And if I couldn't do that, who was he in me, in my life? And I went to 3 different countries. I went to Turkey, and I went to Kenya, and I went to Israel, to Jerusalem. And I came home without an answer. And the only significant thing I remember is in the Hagia Sophia, I'm turning around to find a mosaic, the famous mosaic of Jesus with John the Baptist, and I just wept and wept and wept, and I'm not a crier. You know, I don't know where the tears came from, but that's the only answer I got, is that old mosaic had the power to bring liquid to my eyes that spilled down my face that I had no words to go with. So I've just had a chance to meet with Elaine Pagels to talk about her new book, Miracles and Wonder. And it's an historical Jesus study, but I love the title, Miracles, plural, and Wonder, and how she keeps the wonder piece in there. And part of her wonder as a, you know, Princeton New Testament historian is that the Jesus movement is alive and well today, largely in the Southern Hemisphere, but that people are coming to the story of Jesus, the person, the aliveness of Jesus now, and she finds him in poetry and music and literature and art. And so her wonder is sort of like my wonder, like I am clear Jesus is my Lord. And I think as a Vedic master, you can hear my Indian friend at Piedmont says, it's fine, Jesus is your Lord. Just don't tell me that Lord Krishna cannot be my Lord, you know, or that Lord Vishnu cannot, but Jesus is my Lord. It's as close as I can get. In other words, that is for me the way. It's not the only way. It is the way. I wasn't raised in the way. I chose the way, but I was in a culture that was saturated with that tribal way. And I had to move around a lot in the Christianities to find a way that would let me be as mobile and as flexible as I wanted to be. And I still hang out at the inside edge of, real near the door. Because it's a great place to be. You meet so many people at the door that you know, we need the center. We need I often see an egg. We need that yolk, you know, but I also love the edges. I love the edges because that's frankly where I met everybody from another tradition, is they were at the edge of theirs, or we wouldn't have met. Because they had people who said they shouldn't be talking to me, although not with the vehemence that my folks said I shouldn't be talking to them. But I especially take away your tribal comment, because I'm sure we said at lunch that Indonesia is one of the most rich nations in the world for multiplicity of traditions. And it would be almost impossible to live there without being neighbor
Yeah.
to a lot of people who do not share your worldview particularly. And you can still eat together, and look after each other's kids and on them. It's a long answer. Wow, did you shock me? It's good to see you.
What are the one or two most important things that the Christian tradition could take in from other traditions?
Oh, which Christian tradition? No, in a way, I will answer that, but one thing we never got to in world religions is now let's have a whole semester on different kinds of Christianities. Because I went to Brigham Young and learned about a whole other kind of Christianity that feels really crummy about not being recognized as Christian, by other Christians. So sometimes I'd like to say what I take from Orthodox Christianity, what I take from Catholic Christianity, and then what I take from 90 different Protestant denominations, because it ends up being a diamond, with so many facets, but it's all on one diamond. That might be 90, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So, so the answer to that, what I took from Hinduism, and I'm aware that's a colonial name, but what I took from that was the variety of ways to union with the divine. And I found out I'm probably a karma yogi, and that was such a relief, because that's somebody who does things with their hands. Think Habitat for Humanity, but my tradition is almost all bhakti. It's all about worship, and it's all about that, and I'm okay at that, but I'd much rather do something, or there's Jnana yoga that's about the mind, but it had different ways, and the ways, at least in my 1-inch deep knowledge, didn't judge each other. The image was many ways up one mountain. What I took away from Buddhism was it was almost the yin to the yang of my tradition. The emphasis on close your eyes because wisdom comes here. And if you don't believe the Eight Noble Truths, that's okay. Find something that works. There was such an invitation to experiment. And I think I found out it's a fake Buddha quote, but it's like, don't believe what anybody says, not even me, unless it resonates with your own experience. So I took that away. Judaism goes on and on. The way that Jews can argue, have holy argument with each other, and Christians just go, oh God, what are they? Or at least that was sort of, just the idea that you could get so ferocious about a Talmudic interpretation that it was just to watch. And then Shabbat was a whole other thing together, more weeping, at Shabbat, especially to turn to the door as the bride of the Sabbath comes in. Islam, bodily prayer, never mind all the other kinds of devotion like fasting, Ramadan. But the bodily prayer just knocked me out. And I took students to an ummah that wasn't financially advantaged. So they met in an old grocery store, and that meant that the women were in the same room with the men. So I was back with the grandmas who could do the full prostration with like a grandchild between her knees, and she could still do it. I just was knocked out by the ways in which that was different from my sit still and be quiet sort of tradition. Did I cover them? The ones, and in Native American tradition, we gotta go. She got me started. I'm just gonna be here. I'm just gonna preach a sermon right here. Anyhow, Lakota, my husband is Christian Lakota.
Susan Andrews does that.
Okay, well, I'll tell you about him later. Susan,
You could end this question from Susan.
that's a good way to end. Go Susan.
Please, Susan Andrews.
Okay, I didn't want to cut anybody off. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. 2 comments. First, when David first talked to me 15 years ago, when he arrived as pastor, about this lecture fund, and did I have any ideas for it? I said to him, number 1 is Barbara Brown Taylor. If we could have Barbara Brown Taylor at Bradley Hills, it would warm my heart and would lift up what I think the lecture fund is about. So it's been a long time, but I'm very grateful to you, Barbara, for coming, and for David for being so persistent. Secondly, I want to thank you for focusing on what you focused today. I've used your Holy Envy book in Bible studies. It's a fabulous book, but that is what makes Bradley Hills unique. And you picked up on that. And it's been 50 years of the laity of that church and the pastors and the leadership who have slowly and painfully nurtured the relationship with BJC, and then David's wonderful work to bring in the Muslim congregation. And it has not been an easy path. And there were a lot of fights, particularly when the Presbyterian Church talked about divestment from Israel. So there have been some struggles along the way, but the curiosity, as David said, the commitment and the courage is what's brought this joint mission, witness to the world. So thank you for focusing on that. And thank you to Bradley Hills for being the wonderful people you are.
Amen.
Carol, do you want to close or?
Can't thank Barbara enough, obviously, really, for making the trip, coming to us. And I would encourage everyone here to continue to join us at 9:15 for adult education. We have 2 programs left this year, starting again in September. But next week, we will have a group of panel of women and everyone who can join us to celebrate and look at the women today as we look at Mother's Day. And then have a tea that follows. It's really going to be interesting, not just, we're going to look at all of the issues that are, and hear from folks. And then our final program is with Chris Palmer, who has worked within our community, and his book on dying a beautiful death has been so widely accepted and so something, an issue that I think we could all really benefit from. So spread the good news. This is a place, a forum, but we want to continue, we want to thank everyone and continue to hear from you as to what we can do to build our community. As we're sort of a springboard for the community as well as bringing in. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Carol. Thank you all so much for being part of Adult Ed today and hopefully in the future. And we'll see as many of you as can come to worship at 10:30. See you in a few moments in worship. Peace be with you.
Thanks for everyone.
Yeah.